1990 WAKR. Time to go to film school. On board with us this morning, film professor, good friend of ours, Joe Fortunato. And today we're going back to 1982, a Spielberg flick. Had a hunch. Joe's a fan of Steven Spielberg, and rightfully so. Almost everything Steven Spielberg has done has been a blockbuster, and Joe has been able to research and talk about these movies. Today, Joe goes back to 1982, my friend, with the movie E.T., which was a blockbuster. 9 Academy Award nominations, winning in 4 different categories. It was a blockbuster. Joe?
Good morning, Ray. Yes, and we are going to be talking about E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, which was released June 11th, 1982, which is makes it its 40th anniversary this week. So date yourself by when you saw it as a youngster or as an adult or taking your kids, because it is generational and it's been popular for decades. It had a $10 million budget when it was made, very small budget, and went on to gross over $400 million, which was the highest grossing film of all time at that time. In fact, it was the highest grossing movie until Spielberg beat his own record a decade later with Jurassic Park. So Spielberg kind of taking the reins there for quite a long time on the greatest box office successes of all time. You mentioned it won a bunch of Oscars, mostly technical. John Williams' score won an Oscar. He won another one for E.T. here. It was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Writing, Editing, all that stuff. It was written by Melissa Matheson, and it was number 24 on the AFI 100 list. So it's a very popular movie, very well respected. Melissa Matheson, the writer, was actually, she was a boyfriend of Harrison Ford at the time. They went on to get married. But the movie itself was actually written during production of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So Spielberg would dictate to writer Melissa Matheson, who was there with Harrison Ford, and she would write the first draft while they were on break from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Love that.
In fact, Harrison Ford actually has a cameo in E.T. as Elliot's schoolmaster or headmaster, but that scene was actually cut. So Harrison Ford was in the film, I guess I should say.
Well, Joe, get into the casting a little bit here, because you had Drew Barrymore really coming in and making a point for herself. There were many other people that were rumored of getting some roles, but talk about the formulation of the E.T. cast.
Yeah, of course, Drew Barrymore went on to be a star from E.T. as playing the young Gertie, the youngest member of the clan. Actually, Juliette Lewis auditioned for Gertie, but her father wouldn't let her do it, so she turned it down. Sarah Michelle Gellar also auditioned for Gertie. The role of Mary, the kid's mother, was first offered to Shelley Long of Cheers fame, but she had already signed to do a film called Night Shift, and she had to decline. So there was a number of what-ifs kind of there in the casting. Henry Thomas, who went on to, of course, play Elliot, in his audition, he actually thought of the day his dog died to express sadness and was able to cry on cue, and Spielberg cried along with him and offered him the role right on the spot.
Joe Fortunato.
It's not really casting per se, but an interesting tidbit. Deborah Winger, she provided the temporary voice for E.T., not the final voice that we hear on film, but the temp voice for E.T., and also plays one of the ghouls in the Halloween sequence. So she's dressed up in a monster mask, and you can't see her, but Deborah Winger actually had a weird way of being involved in E.T.
Okay, Joe, get into E.T., the Extra-Terrestrial itself, and talk about the development and the design of this, quote, puppet costume for E.T.
Well, it was actually designed to look like the poet, why am I blanking on the name here, but Carl Sandburg and Albert Einstein and a pug dog. So it was a combination of all those things. It was designed by special effects artist Carlo Rambaldi, and the the character of E.T. was done by a number of different actors in the costume as well. There was a 2-foot-tall stuntman who did most of the scenes, but there was also a 12-year-old boy who was born without legs and was an expert on walking on his hands, and so he played some of the E.T. character moving around.
Joe Fortunato is with us again. He is a film professor. We're at film school right now on E.T. Joe, so oftentimes in the world of movies, you get a blockbuster like this. There's another one, right? There's a sequel. Was there ever a sequel planned, or did I miss it, of E.T.?
There actually was a planned sequel that Spielberg considered, and then it was going to sort of reverse the story where we would go to the alien planet and visit them. But he decided to scrap that. I'm glad he did. I'm not I don't want to say I'm not a big fan of sequels, because there are certain films that lend itself to that. But some films stand on their own, and they're just good enough as they're. And that's what he decided. He said it was going to ruin the specialness of the original and scrap the idea, and we've never had it since.
Joe,
it is funny that you mentioned, that this was such a big blockbuster, but no one expected it to be. It was turned down by a number of studios. One of the great Hollywood stories is that the filmmakers requested that M&Ms be used to lure E.T. Those who've seen the film, of course, there's candy that they use to lure E.T. or to find him. But the Mars company who made M&Ms denied their request, thinking that E.T. was so ugly he would scare children. So they said, no, can't use our candy. Reese's Pieces were used instead, and as a result, Reese's Pieces sales skyrocketed like 400%, and it sort of put them on the map. So it's one of those legendary product placement stories.
Major blunder there by the Mars company, for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, to wrap it up, this was a blockbuster. It was a huge hit. What did you like best about the concept of the movie of E.T. being a film professor? What was number one on the list when you talk about this movie?
Well, it's Spielberg himself said this wasn't really a science fiction movie, but it was more of a family drama, and I concur with that. And it's very Spielberg. In fact, in the studies I've done where I look at actual kinds of shots and shot selection and stuff, it's probably the most quote-unquote Spielberg looking movie of all of his, that and Close Encounters. So they're kind of right there in that late 70s, early 80s realm. But it's a family drama, and it deals with an absentee father, which is a theme of a lot of Spielberg films and stuff like that. I will say one thing that sometimes my students get a kick out of when I talk about this is the one thing that bugs me about E.T., and it's bugged me since I saw it as a kid, is that his name is E.T., the Extra-Terrestrial. I mean, that's like if we were discovered on a planet and they called us HS for Homo sapiens, or you named your dog Canine. Who names their alien buddy, by their genus or E.T. Extra-Terrestrial? I always found that odd that he didn't actually have a name.
True. It was released again this weekend, 1982, the 40-year anniversary of E.T. at Film School with film professor, our good friend Joe Fortunato. Of course, you can see all of his work right at WAKR.net as we go to film school each and every Friday at this time with Joe here on WAKR. Joe, my friend, thanks for the visit again. Looking forward to it again next Friday morning at this time. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Red. We'll see you then.
You got it. Joe Fortunato, film professor, takes us to film school each and every Friday here on 93.5, 1590 WAKR.